All right, welcome back to the show. Today we have Cassie Saquing on this show, her balanced hustle, and she is a soul-centered financial and money mindset coach, a mom of four, and a dedicated wife who helps business owners kill the hustle and make a profit. So I think this is going to be a really good conversation with Cassie because she's going to tell you guys a lot about, that work-life balance, time management, and how to make that all come together for a financially successful business. Now, for our audience, don't forget, if you haven't downloaded the Money Mapper, the link is at the bottom of the show notes, and it's a worksheet that helps you discover financial independence as a business owner. So, Cassie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm so happy to be here today. I appreciate you.
So, let's talk about your business and what you do right now as a consultant. Jump right in. Tell us a little bit about it.
Awesome. So I have owned a brick and mortar business, daycare, for many years and since 2005. And then, I started doing, I think after COVID hit, I really started doing consulting work because I saw the need. Obviously, I needed, a little more income at that point too, because things were shutting down. But I realized like so many women need that support and that help. And we as women do business a little bit differently than other people or even men. So we kind of do, we definitely focus in our our emotions a little bit, and that's a good thing. Like we can grow and we can flow, but sometimes, we need support with that. So I've actually been since 2020, I've been helping women kind of scale their business. Like maybe they've gotten to six figures and they want to go to the next level, but they're struggling because they're getting all these bottlenecks. And that's really what I do. And it's kind of a generalist perspective, even though I focus on the money, but it all works together because it's all spinning together, right? Like
Mm,
I say spinning the plates because the minute you change one plate, everything else is affected.
mm.
So we do focus on money, time management, systems and processes, and process documentation, with at the same time creating space for us to be able to manage our emotions and our health and well-being.
How did owning a daycare help you transition into this consultancy? Because as a mom who has a child in daycare, I bet there's so much you could learn from having a brick and mortar daycare, especially with I actually just interviewed someone, if our audience wants to go back and listen, Genevieve, who was a few weeks ago, and she did something, um, she had origin curriculum, but she was just telling me like the turnover rate is so high with daycare. And it's very hard to have this work-life balance with a daycare center, basically. So how did that prepare you to then help women entrepreneurs in this consultancy position?
Well, I will say this, it was trial by fire. I would say like I was like going through the ring of fire every day. I was like, whoo. Yeah, I think obviously I don't have a business degree. I have an education degree. So I tend to look at things step by step, break things down. Okay, let's take it piece by piece. How can we get from here to there? And thankfully I have a good business partner. She was one of my teachers, and then I brought her on. And we're kind of like yin and yang with our energy, which is good. And so finding like those right support people, but at the same time with daycare, you're dealing with the clients, first of all, the children, then you're dealing with the parents, and then you're also managing the staff. So you really have to be kind of a jack of all trades for being able to handle, everything at one time. You either make it or you break it, you kind of like make or break it. And I think it's just, really trial by fire and figuring out, okay, wait, I'm going to have a mental breakdown if I don't figure out some way to translate this and, start delegating these things, because I was that kind of person who was a control freak and I would just do everything myself. And then I realized I'm actually harming myself. I'm setting a bad example for my team because the teachers were looking to me for guidance and help and support. I couldn't even help them because I wasn't helping myself. So I think being able to handle a lot at once by running a daycare. We have, 120 kids. We have 40 employees. It's a big center compared to some others. We live outside New York City. I definitely learned a lot from dealing with different kinds of parents who commuted to New York every day.
Hmm.
That's it's a very different culture. I grew up in Michigan, and moving to Jersey was a big shock. And I've been here over 20 years though now, so I feel like I'm a Jersey girl. And, I learned a lot, just literally years of learning and experience, and then being open-minded to changing my ways. And I think that's it. It's like, are you teachable? Can you flex? Are you willing to give up your idea of what is right or wrong and kind of throw those words out the window and say there's actually no right or wrong? It's what you, as the visionary of your company, need to create around yourself to make this work. So, I love kids. Obviously, I have 4 kids. I love education, but I started to really love the admin part of the job and like managing and creating systems and processes. And I never thought I would like that. Believe me, I was like, I'm a musician, I'm an educator, like this is kind of what I'm doing. And I think, for me, it was definitely just a big shift in my mindset. So, and then when I went to help other people, you can do something, but teaching it is like the next level, right? Like, how do I translate it from me to actually be able to share it with someone else and have it drop in for them? And I think becoming a consultant actually took me to the next level in my own business. I was able to even create a better system for my staff because we obviously have a full-time director, a full-time assistant director running the place. My business partner and I are there once a week. We are hands-on. We know what's going on, but we're not there on the dailies.
Mm.
So I think like teaching someone else these things, and I've had clients over the past 4 years, actually helped me translate it to other people so that I could then be able to break it down for them too, and then kind of customize it for them. I've customized it for every single one of my clients. So there's kind of a starting point, and then you kind of customize from there.
How long did it take you to get your first client in your consultancy business since you're coming from a completely different sector and field?
You know, I started out doing kind of because I looked at what I could do at first. I was like, oh, well, I do my own bookkeeping. I do these things. I started doing some bookkeeping and then like financial management, I would say. Like, here's a way to like manage your money. And that's when I really started developing my profits tax system, which I also offer to people because you can make a lot of money. Like, you can get to 6 figures pretty quickly, but how you leverage that money into scaling is like a whole nother skill
Mm.
set. So, I found that I'd get these clients with word of mouth. People would recommend me and say, "Oh, I learned this from her, and I was able to do this." So they would recommend me to people, which is great. I really appreciate that. Um, but that's the way I got them, and then I started realizing, like, oh, well, they actually need a way to manage. So I started creating systems, like for my clients. I started with my own way, and then I'd be like, oh, well, this doesn't translate for them. This can translate for me, type of thing. So we started doing that, and it's just grown and evolved. And then I met another friend whose name is Marnie. She taught me a lot of ways to translate systems and processes, which I was doing already, but I didn't have words for it. I didn't have a way to put it into English or document it. So I asked her to train me because I feel like I can always learn something new. So she trained me in her system, and I've just been integrating all of it together ever since. So
So, what recommendations do you have then for women entrepreneurs for these systems and processes, time management techniques? What can you share with them? Maybe the top two or three that you've found have really benefited your clients and even your own businesses over the years.
absolutely. Yeah, I love that because just to get to the bottom line, what I've noticed, and this is just my own experience, it could be different. I'll go into a company and they'll have these job descriptions and like, oh, here's the roles and responsibilities. But then what's actually happening in the building or among the team doesn't match, right? So right
Mhm.
away, there's this disconnect between what's happening on boots on the ground versus what's in the documentation. So what I first start doing is process documenting, like what are you actually doing every day in your job? So we literally, it's so simple. Like it's like stupid simple, like open a Google Doc, call it process documentation and title it and start date. And then just have everyone who's like on a leadership team, anyone who has the ability to have influence on your business profits or outcomes, put them on that list. And then I literally do Monday through Friday. Like I make them for a couple weeks straight, write down what they do, timestamp it if possible. I know some things are like if you're a front desk person, like in a clinic, that's really challenging to timestamp every single call. But
Yeah.
obviously you've got blocks of time, but timestamp it and then really look at this is what I actually do every day. And this is where it gets really, really clear, because then you can take that document and you can look at what their actual job description is. First of all, align it, because some people were hired for one thing and they're doing something completely different 3 years later. And that's not fair to that person. It's not fair to the owner. It's not fair to everyone. Um, and it's also probably not legal. So it's really important to have that aligned. And we start with that. That is such an eye-opening exercise, and it's so simple and it's free. I would just recommend starting with process documentation. And then your job, like my job as integrator, COO, is to really start to meld those together and integrate them. And a lot of ways we do that, the next step would be like, who reports to who? Like a lot of times that's really confusing. And even if you have like a small, agency model business online, maybe you hire out people and things like that. It's really important to have people, when you hire them, to say, this is who you report to, this is how you report to me, this is what I expect, because then it comes down to the time management. And that's the third piece, is start creating some rules around how you schedule meetings, when, and how long they should be. Where do they land that information for you as an owner? And it should not be always just face-to-face meetings. So many of us, we get buried in meetings, and it should only be like, 20 to 25% of your week, because you need time to think, you need time to do your one-on-one task work as well, but just really start to assess your schedule. One tool I love to use is Reclaim AI, reclaim.ai. And I'm not part of their company or anything. I'm not getting paid for this, but I noticed that it's a great tool with your Google Calendar. It fills in a lot of really great, like if you can create habits in it, you can drop it in and block out space, and do Google focus time and all sorts of things. But just create some of those processes around how to schedule meetings. How do you communicate with the boss? How often are there check-in points? And we do a weekly scorecard process so that me and the owner can access these pieces of information anytime. And we
Mm.
pull reports and things like that so that it's always available. It does not depend on a meeting. If there's any meeting that could be turned into a Loom video or a Google Meet, recording, that it should always be turned into something that's an asset to the business. So all these things are like really important to create rules around, and it's different for every owner, right? It's different for every businesswoman, what you want. Some people are verbal processors and they need more meetings. Other people will just tune out and start falling asleep. So, start to really block your time out in a very smart way.
It's also like playing to your strengths as a person and as a business owner, like you said, the verbal versus nonverbal. I do very well with email. I don't mind meetings, but I don't need tons of them because I'm very good with email, as long as the other person's also good with that, or like a project management system or whatever. I did have
Yes.
a thought. Have you ever encountered a situation where, you go in and you do the audit of the roles and job descriptions, and it turns out someone's really not doing what they were hired for. So then they need to hire someone else to do that role, because then wouldn't that be, obviously investing more money? And have you ever had pushback from that?
Of course. And it's so personal, right? It's like, well, I hired this person and now I'm attached to them emotionally. Like
Yeah.
they're part of my team. I can't let them go. And I think that's part of the process. Like you have to develop a decision-making process for your business. And that's another thing we work on. How do you make decisions in your business? And so many women, it's like, well, it's my gut. Okay, I completely trust intuition as well. Like being a business owner for almost 20 years, I'm the same way. But the problem is when you go by feel, a lot of times when you actually do a data pull on whatever it is, it could be P&L based on payroll, it could be whatever it is. You start to pull data, you may realize that your feelings may not align with data. So I think it's just really I think with the pushback that I've experienced, so what we do is we start to create a decision-making process for the long term. And we usually look at like, 2 years from now, what do we want the company to look like? 5 years and then 10. And then you look at that person. Are they in a role that fits them and their skill set? Like, are they competent? The competency level, is that something that will fit for the next 2 years, 5 or 10 years? Or will they need to shift to a new role? Or is it something where they don't fit our goals, our mission, our values. So they're not a good fit anyway. Maybe they were a good fit for the first 5 years, but they're not a good fit for the next 10. And especially as visionary of the company, if you're the owner, you should be the visionary. You should be the one leading and guiding the direction of the vision and the dreams and where you want it to go. Then that's the way you start to make decisions instead of it being so personalized. And there are ways to let people go in a very kind way. And I would suggest giving generous severances if that's something that you come to realize and you have a very clear decision-making process involved with that. And if you are guided, like as you adjust this decision-making process, this filter, what will happen is people will naturally start to fall away because they'll realize I'm not on board with this. This is not my mission. I don't fit with this. And if you're holding them accountable to those things, like your value system, then they'll even start to realize themselves. And you'll start having like 30-day conversations where it's like, hey, this, and this isn't been reported. And what's going on? How can I support you? Okay, here's a performance plan for the next 30 days. We're going to meet again. And if you're on top of those things and you give people chances, they still don't show up, they still can't perform, whether it's an attitude issue, a skill set, or maybe they're just not, they don't have the competency for that or understanding or capacity to fill that role, then you can have the conversation because you've documented it, you've compared it to your long-term plan, you've held them accountable for the values of the company, and maybe your values have changed as a visionary too. And I've had that as well. So there's always, every company I've gone into, there's always someone who needs to be shifted or let go. And that's just part of the process. And that's part of the bottleneck clearing of scaling your business.
Do you feel that most of the women or people that you go in and consult with, do they know deep down? They're like, yeah, I think that, yeah.
They already know.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes it's like hearing it from somebody else coming in from the outside. It's a good confirmation, right? I mean, it's really hard. This is not in any way easy. I know I'm breaking it down here. Step one, step two. It's not easy and it's very emotional. And that's part of what I support them through as well. And honestly, what usually happens is the rest of the team breathes a sigh of relief because they're sick of it or they're frustrated. And also that person is actually happier. They didn't realize how unhappy they were because they were being asked to do something they didn't have the capacity for. And that's not really fair, And so, yeah.
So then on the flip side, do you then help your clients with the process of hiring to make sure that they have someone who's a really good fit?
Yes. And I think that's part of it. Once we really assess what's actually being done on the ground versus like then comparing that to, 2, 5, and 10-year plan, I think then you start to realize, okay, this is where we need to hire. We move people around first, let them go, and then see what spots are open so that you can create those containers for scaling. And I think that that's part of, assessing the roles and responsibilities and the accountability chart and that kind of thing. And just going back and forth and talking through it with the owner and recommending, I've been part of that process of hiring. I've even done the hiring myself for that person, obviously with their final okay. But I do think that it's all connected and you're hiring ahead, like you're hiring for that person who's going to be there in 5 years instead of just filling a spot because you're desperate, right?
What's that line I always hear on my podcast? Hire slow, fire fast. There we go. I hear that all the time. People talk about that all the time. But I like what you said, hire ahead for the role in 5 years of where you want to be. I think that's really important as a business owner and a woman business owner to be thinking about that. Where do I want to be in 5 years and make sure you're hiring? Because otherwise you're going to end up with someone you just settled for. And as you grow, it's going to be someone that you might not even in a year. And that's not need them. And that's unfair to them and unfair to your business.
Right. And there's a lot of money you invest in people, not just the salary. There's your time, there's, training, there's a lot of onboarding costs that you'll lose. So you're right.
What do you recommend to your clients or other women entrepreneurs who are listening right now? They're struggling with having a personal life and also scaling their business and growing it. How do you help them? Because you said, I read on your your website. You help business owners increase profits and create improved cash flow while reducing workload stress. And I feel like usually that does not go hand in hand. I mean, maybe not all the time, but there's this aspect of like, oh, if you're increasing profits, you're working really hard and you don't really have less stress. You have more stress, and then you don't have a life either. So what do you recommend to those women who are in that hustle, in that scaling, but they still want to have their personal life, whether they have a family or whether they just want to have that time to themselves?
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I think you may even need to institute a phase in plan where, it's like, okay, for the 6 months, I'm going to really be all in. I'm going to put in full-time hours. I'm going to be growing the business. Obviously, your number one job is to bring money into the business. That's your number one job. If you have an
Mhm.
established business and you're at six figures, the main goal would be to hire your mini me. You want someone who is not going to compete with you. You want a number two, and they should be able to execute on everything you want executed. And I think that's really an integrator. It's an operations director, whatever you want to call it in your particular business. Everyone's a little different, but it's the person who keeps all the plates spinning, who makes sure that everything happens that needs to happen and tie in all of the pieces of the business so that they make sense. Because a lot of times we have silos, we have just different groups operating in their own and nobody's connecting the dots. But I think number one is to find your mini me and replace yourself. And that's what I did with the daycare. We hired a director, and then eventually we saved enough money to hire a full-time assistant director so we could both really step out of the business and the dailies. And what happens when you do that is you start to see the big picture and you start to have time to have a bigger vision for your business. And that's a process. And it might take 6 months to hire someone, develop them, trust them. There's a big element of trust. Um, there are some ways you can put in to protect yourself as well, NDAs, non-competes, that type of thing legally. But at the same time, you're going to have to take that leap of faith and trust that person. And it's
Mm.
a grieving process. You're going to have to let go of your business. And I think that's the number one thing that I find is like, and it took me years to let go of my business, to be honest. Like embarrassingly enough, years. I'll be the first to admit it. So I really understand when it's like the only way to scale is to get out of the way. And
Mm.
the only way to get out of the way is to have it documented
Mm.
so you can teach someone else. So it's a process, but
Mm.
the minute you take that leap and you really start focusing your energies on that, you'll get there. But if you never start that process, you're always going to be stuck in the daily operations and you always have your head down. You'll never be looking forward. And you can operate that way if that's what your goal is, to stay at that level and control everything. And I was a total control freak, and that's fine. But if you ever want to get out of that, you gotta do that.
I love that you're speaking from experience. You're saying I was there for a long time and I learned a better way.
Don't be me. Yeah. Please. It's suffering, pain and suffering.
So, do you think then one of the most important action items a woman can do to scale and grow their business significantly is to hire that number two person?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Number one step. And that means managing your money differently. I mean, you're going to have to take a dip in your income, and that's a
Yeah.
commitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have time to go out and be on podcasts or to grow your marketing experience and like bring more money into the business, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off.
Yeah. What do you teach women who are trying to change their mindset around scaling a business? Who might maybe they say, "Well, I don't want to spend that money on a second person because that means I make so much less money or the business is spending more money." Or what do you do to help them with their mindset?
Well, I'm a very spiritual person, so I do believe in God. I'm like, okay, God, to give it to you. Like, there's a definitely connection with a higher being for me, first of all. But in terms of mindset, I do with my clients, I do tapping. So we do EFT and we talk through the problems as we're tapping on our bodies and our median points. So it's like acupressure, because let's face it, there's going to be work. It's going to be painful. There's going to be a little grief involved. There's going to be less money. It's a real commitment to scale. And I just don't believe in some of the stuff I see on social media. I laugh at some of it and I just, like, these people are ridiculous, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, because I've done it and I've helped other people do it. And I just like to be honest and in integrity on this, but to push through, it's like having a baby. You're birthing a child. Like you have it all internalized now. It's in your body, this first six figures, like, and then scaling it to the next level means you're going to have to birth it outside of you. And that can be a really scary process, but it's like that last moment when it's the most painful is when the baby comes out and there's this beautiful life. And I
Mm.
think that's the hardest part is like regulating your emotions through that horrific transition ring of fire moment when the baby's coming out. You're birthing your company in a new way. And I talk about this just because I gave birth 4 times, right? I was like, okay, it's worth it. It's worth it. um, but I think like that is the scariest moment, but it will also build your faith in yourself. And we definitely do like emotional regulation tapping because that's helped me. Because there are times in your body, like you can tell yourself I'm fine, but your body's having a panic attack, or your stomach is like in knots, or you can't
Mm.
sleep at night. That's a lot. And I do obviously really recommend, getting out there, moving your body every day, not because we're trying to look gorgeous and beautiful, but because your body is carrying all of those emotions that
Mm.
you're holding for other people in your business or even your clients. It's like that's what our job is we get paid to do, but I have to release it every day. And so like moving your body in some way and then tapping and then focusing on the goal because it's gonna be like going through a little bit of a storm. But when you get on the other side, you start to make decisions differently and you start to see more long term. And it's just incredible. It's like, getting beyond the sunset, or if you're in a plane, you're going above the clouds, you're like, oh my gosh, you're stuck in the storm underneath and you hit above and it's just beautiful sunshine. I think that's what I do to help people stay connected to the goal. It's not just about the money, it's about, well, this is how you buy your time back is
Mm.
by delegating and hiring out. But then you have to learn the next skill set is to become a manager, and a lot of people struggle with that. So
Mm.
that's also how I help teach people to be better managers as well. You manage the managers instead of doing the managing yourself or doing the job.
What do you think is the biggest difference between leadership and management?
That's a great question. I think leadership is focusing on the long term and driving um, KPIs toward the long term goal, or like those stats, those performance indicators in the business, whatever they are. Um, and you're looking as a leader, you're always looking ahead. Yes, you know what's going on right now, but you always have that mindset of all my behavior is going to be looking down the road. Whereas managing is you're making sure that daily operations happen, things are going on. There's the money's being processed properly. I look at it more like a little bit of the worker bee and making sure people are happy, clients are happy. But leadership, true leadership, to me is visionary, looking
Mm.
ahead.
If you could distill it down, what do you think are the top three mistakes that women make when they're trying to grow their business and scale it from 6 to 7?
Like me, not letting go, um, not wanting to trust someone else with their baby, their precious business. And that's the top
The
one.
irony of that, because you had a daycare and people are trusting you and letting go of their babies, I think that's so funny.
Yes. Well, I
Because
mean,
that's like
think
the
about it. It's
literal, like,
huge.
letting-
It is huge. Our businesses are our babies too, right? It's like I
yes.
birthed this, I created this, it's my creation. And, we lie to ourselves and say, no one can do it like I can, right? That's like a big lie. I used to think like nobody can talk to the parents like I can. And, it's just not true. I mean, our director now, she's fabulous. I told her the other day, you're a better director than I ever was. Like, thank God. You're amazing, amazing. And it's the truth. Um, but if I hadn't let go of that
Mhm.
control, she wouldn't have the freedom to be herself. So I think like that's the number one is we don't let go. We think control is the way. And then some people let go of control and they never monitor or hold people accountable. There's like a swing, like, oh, I'm going to let go now. I don't have to do anything. I get to sit on the
Yes.
beach all day. You're like, no, no, no. You have to manage your team. So you have to manage the managers. And then another big mistake I see is that people will make a lot of money and they don't know what to do with it. Maybe it's the first time they've ever made six figures in their life, or they're not sure because they've always been employees and they don't know how to manage their money. So it becomes like a big stress to them. Like they can make a lot of money, but then, well, what the heck do I do with it now? How do I meet payroll? How do I do this? And it's just like, it's just very focused on revenue. And I get it. That's our number one job as business owners. But they forget that there's a way to manage in such a way um, to be able to think ahead for the future and automate things that they don't have to worry about, like, paying their self-employment tax, their own taxes for the business, making payroll, making sure there's enough for operations, and then also owner draw. Like a lot of times they don't pay themselves first. It's like, well, I paid all the bills and there's nothing left.
Mm.
You can have six-figure bills, right? Because you think you have that container and really you haven't contained the operating expenses. So I would say those are the three things. It's like not letting go too much, and then not manage your money in a
Mm.
very smart way.
I think that's really good advice. Um, so I was, this is an interesting question, but for your business specifically, I was wondering if you could tell us about a time. Have you ever had a client, either with the daycare or with your consultancy business, that's been unhappy? And how did you handle that? And what do you recommend to women who have to handle maybe in their line of business? Maybe they sell products or maybe it is services, but they get unhappy clients from time to time.
Yeah. Um, Almost 19 years in daycare. Can you imagine? Yes.
Yeah, right.
It happens probably on a monthly basis, just simply because, especially with your people's children, my gosh, anything can happen. Things can fall through the cracks. Um, but I would say, and this is part of me having to document my process, is like, I see a lot of people making the mistake of handling complaints in such a way they don't validate the person's emotions. Maybe it's an angry parent. They come, this happened to my child. And, you have not, even if you don't agree with how they're perceiving the situation, because you were there, you saw it happen a different way. There's always three sides to every story. Let's remember. Um, Validating that person's emotions of like, I could see how this would be really upsetting from what you're telling me, like validating that, like, people don't just get upset for no reason, right? Like people are usually pretty rational and reasonable. I mean, we still have some that aren't, but that's pretty
Mhm.
rare. So, validating and really listening, like putting away the phone, closing the doors, focusing, paying, attention, eye contact. And maybe that's over the phone, maybe it's over a Zoom call if you have clients, and then apologizing for what you did wrong. Because if it's something where you weren't in the wrong, then say, you know what, I'm not seeing how this could be wrong, but how can we change the situation so that you're happy and I'm happy and everybody's happy? Like, let's work together. It's a collaborative idea of fixing the problem together. Because a lot of times, and I don't know, I'm not sure. Where do you live again? I can't remember. Yeah, I think I'm in
Massachusetts, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. I know you're on the East Coast, but Northern Jersey, people's first response is yelling. And I'm from Michigan. I was like, why are you yelling at me? That's just their no. It's like, just yell and you'll get your way. And that's just not. We just don't want to encourage that, obviously, right? So, like, I think it's more they're so surprised by the idea of like we're open to collaborating. Like, how can we solve this together? And they're like, wait, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I think that, you'll be surprised as a business owner how many ideas people can present to you that will actually become a process later on in your
Mm.
business. We've had that happen over the years in the daycare, and it was beautiful. It was like, oh, this parent recommended this because of this situation. That's a great idea. Let's do that now because it makes so much more sense from their perspective,
Mm.
and I think in the consultancy business, I had a person I was working with last year, and my daughter was going through a lot personally last year, and I just could not be mentally present. And we had to have a conversation, and that client was very kind toward me, and we agreed to part mutually because I just couldn't focus, and that was on me, right?
Mm,
And I think the more in integrity we stay, um, the better off we can be. But first, to validate other people's emotions and listen first, talk second, because that's the best way. You'll be shocked. Um, and I think a lot of times too is like creating that open dialogue for and still maintaining respect of position, right? Like
mm,
any one of my staff members could come up to me today and say something, but it needs to be in a very particular way, in a certain, not in front of a parent. Obviously,
mm.
like there are ways,
Yeah.
like there are containers for you to like voice your opinion, and um, I think that that comes back to systems and processes. But I think managing difficult clients, and also if it's, let's say it's a client who just repeat difficult, which was not in my case last year, but if it was and it just wasn't a good fit, then that's not a bad conversation to have. Just say, I don't think we're aligned anymore, and these are my values, and I don't see that we fit with that, and that's okay. Like, can I help you find someone else to work with you, maybe who's in a similar, maybe they're an integrator as well, or a CEO, they do, business management. I could refer you to someone. It's just
Mhm,
not a good fit for me, and I think that being honest is the best way.
mhm. What do you think? No, scratch that question. I'm going back. What about your business plans for the next 5 years? You talk a lot about helping your clients 2 to 5 years down the road. What are your business plans for the next 2 to 5 years?
Oh, thank you. Well, that's great. So for me, my plans are I've been working with high ticket clients, right, for the past 4 years. So they paid a lot to have my attention and get my focus. So, for me, I'm switching now because my biggest client from last year hired me to be on her team, which I love. And it's like so aligned with my values, my mission, that I've definitely committed to her for the next 18 months. But what I'm doing now is just creating courses that kind of talk about these things. And
Mm,
so this year is my creation year, and I'm just putting it out there on my social and obviously going on podcasts and talking about it. But my idea is to create low ticket offers so that people can have access to this. Like maybe they're not ready to scale yet, but they want to figure it out, unlike me, who did it trial by fire. Don't be like that. Here's a way to do it, and like create containers ahead of time so you know how to manage this next step. You know how to get rid of this bottleneck. You know how to start managing your time better and create, really good positive boundaries so that when things do blow up, you're not freaking out and like leaving your family at home for, weeks on end.
mm,
So some of these things I'm putting into courses, and just my mission is really to help so many women, as many women as I can, really grow and scale their businesses. And even if they don't want to scale, but they want to maintain, here are ways to buy more time back for yourself
mm.
to have that work-life balance. So that's my goal for 2024. And long term, I would love to, create a mastermind, where it's a live thing, but I don't have time for that right now, and that's fine. But, I just want to be accessible and, offer people something that I've learned along the way, and just be able to share that knowledge with them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to touch briefly on before we wrap up. You mentioned you have a business partner, and I've had people on this podcast who have had, I would say most of them have not had successful business partnerships. A few have. So I'd like to know your recommendations when seeking a business partner, when working with a business partner. How do you make it work so that it is
Mm.
successful?
Yeah, I think I have a rare relationship. We joke about it. We're like husband and wife partners, right? Work husband, work wife. Um, and we've been partners since '09. Yeah. So that's a good run, and we're still fine. Like we're still doing really well. So I think the main thing is to really know your own values first and be super clear. What is my own personal mission? And what are my value system, and really, really sit with it. Sometimes even something like being generous with the company's money for the employees, it could be a very hard sticking point. Like maybe one of you wants to give a bonus and the other one doesn't. Like those are things down the road that could really, really cause a problem. I would say money, time allocation, And also, you don't want to have a partner who has the same exact skill set as you because you're going to be in competition.
Mm.
You want to find someone who is your balancer and who has a different skill set. So my business partner had been working in corporate daycares for years. And, she had an education degree as well. She had different experiences. She had very good office skill sets, organizational skill sets, understanding of like schedules and like, it's like Jenga. When you think about 9 classrooms for 11 and a half hours a day, can you imagine scheduling that out and making sure one ratio and all that? My brain would explode. I'd be like, I can handle money. I cannot handle the schedule. I just look at it and go cross-eyed. Her brain is just like, tick, 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 like it's like we really, really balanced each other out. And we would always have open communication. And we had an agreement that no matter how challenging something would be, even if we couldn't say it out loud, we'd email it to each other. Like we
Ah,
can't, if
okay.
we get so upset, we like, I'm going to email you and then we'll, like you have to have some sort of way to communicate. And it is like a long-term marriage. So you have to really be committed to that person, thinking the best of them, believing the best in them, even if people are saying otherwise, like being loyal. And I think that, you have to look at it like a really long-term relationship. Now, if that person is not in the dailies, let's say they're just an investment investor, like they're kind of, silent partner,
Mm.
that would be a very different experience where maybe yours is the sweat equity put into the business. You're the one they're managing and doing the stuff and they're just investing, you're giving them a piece of the profit. That's a little different, but you still need to align with values because
Yeah.
I promise you it will come up. It always comes up. And I've had friends who've had to break up partnerships over these types of things. And I'm so grateful to God that I haven't. I mean, it's so funny. We live like a quarter mile apart from each other, not on purpose. It just happened that way. Like we bought different houses and, I don't know. I'm really blessed and I'm grateful for her. So if she's listening right now, I'm going to share this with her because I tell her that a lot, but it's probably not enough. So I'm not an easy person to work with either. So there's that. And because I do have strong opinions, I'm a fixer. I'm like, let's get this done,
Oh my gosh, yes.
And, and so she's like, well, okay, let's think about how this might come across publicly. Okay, you're right. We have kind of a 24-hour rule. So we have these little like set things in place that really
Like
help.
guidelines almost or boundaries to help with your relationship. And I totally get that fixer thing because I feel like with my friends, there are times where they're like, okay, Kiri, back off. Like, this is a situation where I don't want you to fix it. I'm just telling you what's going on. Cause I'm immediately like, oh, no, that's horrible. Let's fix it. A, B, C, D. Here, I can help you. I know people. And it's like, no, no, no.
You're like, I
Chill
just need
out.
a listening ear.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
think
I
I think that's
totally
it.
feel that. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
totally
the
get
the staff the staff members who need a listening ear tend to go to her, and then they'll come to me for problem fixing. So, I have a soft side. I promise. I think I've softened up over the years. Even on myself, I think I was so hard on myself, right? And the more I started to forgive myself and like give grace to myself, I noticed it was definitely coming out toward my staff as well, and my friends, my family, my husband. I was like,
it.
oh, this has a good effect.
So, where can we find you? Please share with us your website, any social media handles. If our audience wants to connect with you, where will they be able to find you?
Awesome. I am on Profit Passion Academy on Instagram. I would love for you to join me over there just because the links are all there, the stuff is there. You can go to my, website, you can see everything there. So please join me. And I have free training on there as well. So, click the links, look around. I do offer a lot for free just because I know it's a big step to really start thinking about these things if you want to scale. Um, but yeah, I really do. I like to offer a lot of value to people because I didn't have that when I was starting out. I wish I did.
Mm,
So, but yeah,
mm.
Profit Passion Academy on Instagram.
Great. Thank you so much. So,
Thank
Cassie, what
you.
is one philosophy, mantra, or quote you try to run your business by?
I really love Brene Brown. Like, I have a crush on her, of course. And I think that the main mantra that she talks about that really struck me in leadership is clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And I used to be clear and unkind, if that makes sense. And my goal is to be clear and kind and just get to the point and, stop beating around the bush. If someone needs to be fired, it's just like, you're not going to be with us after today. And this is how it's going to go. Like things like that, where it's just like, this isn't working for me. And this is why, and how can we fix it together? And I think, clear is kind and unclear is unkind is just a really great way to live in your whole
Mm.
life, especially in business.
Mm, like that. Well, thank you, Cassie. I really appreciate your
Thank
time and
you.
for joining me on this interview. And if you're part of our audience listening to the show and you also liked what Cassie said, please share it with any of your friends and family or fellow colleagues who would also gain a lot of information from this very valuable interview. So thank you. And until next time, for my audience, you can find me on LinkedIn or tag me on Instagram at the Kiri Mohan. So thank you, Cassie, again for your time. Really appreciate it.